In this video, I'm going to show you the top 5 most commonly asked questions in Marks & Spencer's interviews, and I'm going to show you how you can plan fantastic answers that help you smash your Marks & Spencer's interview. So let's look at the first question that comes up all of the time, and that is simply, what shifts are you happy to do at M&S? And if you don't plan a good answer to this and you answer it in the wrong way, that could really harm your chance of getting the job, and they will choose another candidate instead of you. So let's look at the key aspects of an answer to be successful. So the first thing is you want to be as open-minded as possible. You want to show that you are open to a wide range of times, and fundamentally, it's very important to show a lot of flexibility. The more flexibility you can show, the better you're going to do on this question. They're ultimately looking for people that are available to staff the times that they need. And if you're extremely flexible, that's going to really help your case a lot. One of the ways that people really mess up this question is they start saying about the times that they can't work or they prefer not to, rather than focusing on all of the times that you can do. And if you're listing lots of times that you're not available for and lots of clashes with other things in your schedule, that makes them question whether you're really serious about this job and you're actually prioritizing your work appropriately. The other great tip to be successful in this is to think about some good phrases and some things that Marks and Spencer's like to hear that actually help their business and tick the right boxes for hiring. So they like to hear things like, you're open to working the full range of store hours. If you can say that, that's showing brilliant flexibility. If you can say something like, you're happy to work around business needs, that shows an open-minded nature, and you can jump in and help when they need staff, because staffing changes all the time, and having people that are there and ready to go is really helpful to managers. If you're happy at work in school holidays, that's something you mention. If that's a time that you would want to take time off, this is not the thing to bring up in your interview, so don't talk about school holidays. If you're happy to work at short notice, you can say that. That's one other thing that's good to mention. If you're open to overtime, definitely say that. You may not be offered very much overtime, but saying that you're open to it is quite useful in this interview. And also, you, of course, get paid more if you do some overtime. If you're happy to work evenings and weekends, of course, not every evening and every weekend, but you could work some evenings and some weekends, to be fair. And that's something that you could also mention. And fundamentally, the top tip is to avoid saying no if you can. If they ask you about certain times, if you say no, that might be the time that they need to hire people for. They might have certain working patterns in mind that they've advertised in the job, or that they are thinking of as hiring to staff those times. If you say no to the times that they need, then they're not going to hire you. So saying yes is going to help your case and will massively increase your chance of getting the job. So let's move on to another super important question, which is, what do you know about M&S? Unsurprisingly, if you turn up for your interview knowing nothing about the company other than the very basics and you haven't done any research, that's going to look really bad. So if they ask this question and you're not prepared for it, it's going to go down really badly. And also, if you prepare for this, even if they don't ask this question exactly, you've got lots of good knowledge and awareness for your interview, and you can drop that throughout the interview. So if you're asked this question, you start by saying the obvious things that everybody knows. Then you show that you've actually bothered to do some research, and then to make your answer even better and to make it a little bit impressive, you want to teach the interviewer something new. So something that perhaps the interviewer doesn't even know, and you can drop that in to impress them. So I'm going to show you the key facts that if you remember and note down, you will be well prepared for this. And it's not that much to remember, but these are really key facts that show that you've got some good knowledge of the business. So the first thing you do is you state the really obvious. Marks and Spencer is what we call a multi-channel retailer. They're not just stores, they're stores plus online, and those two businesses work together. So one channel is stores, one channel is online. That's why we refer to it as multi-channel, and that's how they often describe themselves. They specialize in food, home, and clothing. They do some other things, but that is their core business. They are in what's called the FTSE 100 currently, so they're in the 100 largest companies in the UK. They were founded all the way back in 1884, and they were founded by Michael Marks and Thomas Spencer. That's where the Marks and Spencer come from. So remember their first names, and there is a nice fact about the company. They are in the premium segment of the market. So you have different retailers with different price points and different quality. Marks and Spencer is higher market, it's up market, slightly more expensive, but focused on delivering very high quality at a reasonable price. They are led by their own brands. When you walk around Marks and Spencer, you see lots and lots of products branded as Marks and Spencer. That's a mark of quality, and they use that to lead their branding and their sales. And of course, they make more money selling their own branded things than they do quite often selling branded things, because you have to share the money with the brands. They have other businesses. For example, they have M&S Energy. They are very big on renewable energy. All their stores are powered by renewable energy. And as a fun fact, Marks and Spencer actually owns some wind turbines as well. So you could say that. They've got M&S Bank, which they started a long time ago. That's also another offering that they have. They have a partnership with BP, and they're involved in the BP Simply Food store. So if you go to BP petrol stations, you will see these alongside them. And another good tip, just as a simple, easy fact to remember, is to know who the CEO is. Just know their name and learn that name. My other top tip, and you can get absolutely amazing, extremely detailed information about their strategy, what's going on in the business, what they're focusing on, and also, you can get all their financials, so you can see how the business is performing. You can get absolutely everything you could ever need to do for your research in their annual report. So I'd have a skim read. You don't have to read it like you would read a book. Just skim through it, pick out a few facts that you think are interesting, and that will really help you be super well prepared for this. So that's how you answer this question. Feel free to screenshot this if you find it helpful. Drop in as many of these facts as you can, and you will show that you've done some good research. So let's move on to the next question, which is, how would you handle a rude and abusive customer? Sadly, from time to time when you work in retail, you have to deal with these sort of people that think they can come into a store and behave like this. And for that reason, a lot of companies often ask this question: how would you deal with it? And they want to see that you say the right thing and not the wrong thing. So let's look at the key elements of a good answer. So the first thing you say is that I would remain calm. I'm not going to argue back. I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm not going to get into a confrontation. I'm going to be very calm and very professional at all times. The next thing you say is that you're always going to follow Marks and Spencer's policies. So if a customer is shouting at you, demanding a refund for something that they're not actually entitled to a refund for, or is asking for something unreasonable, you won't be able to facilitate that. You're always going to follow correctly the policies that are laid down by Marks and Spencer, but you're going to do it in an understanding and compassionate way. And then the next thing you say is a really simple word, is that your focus is on de-escalating the situation. So use the word de-escalate. You want to calm the situation down. You want to be very compassionate, caring to the customer in a way where if they're irate, you're trying to understand what the issue is. You want to fix the problem. And one of the most powerful things quite often for a customer that's being a little bit rude and argumentative is if you just stop for a bit, listen to what they're saying. That quiet listening and taking them seriously can really suddenly de-escalate. If they're making an angry complaint and they realize that someone is actually listening and actually really trying to solve their problem, that is a strong thing to de-escalate it. So get those three ideas in, but remaining calm, following their policies, and de-escalating the situation, and you will succeed in this question. Let's move on to the next one, which is describe your biggest strengths and weaknesses. This is one that you do not want to make up on the day. You want to have thought about it and have a weakness ready and have a strength ready. If you pick wrong, you're either missing an opportunity or you could blow the whole interview. So let's start by thinking about strengths. So the first thing is the strength has to be significant. It has to be something important. So don't pick a strength that's not very important at all. Pick something that actually matters. Then think of something that you could provide to back it up. Could that be a reference from a former manager? Could that be an example of a time where you use this strength, or a qualification that you have that demonstrates that strength? Something to make it a bit stronger. The easiest one is to think of an example when you've used it, and that gives some backing to it. And then the strength must be something that positively impacts M&S's business, something that they actually care about. And I'll give you some inspiration of some ideas of things you could talk about. When you answer it, you say very simply, a major strength I have is, say the strength that you've picked, and I'll show you some ideas in the bottom in a second. And then what you need to do in the next part is, when working at M&S, this strength will, and explain how that's going to make you better at your job. That's how you answer it. So some ideas: if you've got work experience working in any sort of retail or even a restaurant, anything customer facing, your experience could be your strength, that you're really experienced in doing this sort of job. If you're great at customer service, you could talk about that. If you're friendly, patient, organized, if you're very proactive, These are all great strengths and things that they would like to hear, and they would like to hire people with those strengths. So pick one of those or think up your own and use the structure that I provided, and you will have a good one for the strength. The next one you have to worry about is biggest weakness. And of course, you can blow the whole interview if you pick the wrong one. So the first thing you must do is make sure it is a genuine weakness. Don't try and pass off a fake weakness. It's quite insulting, and it shows you haven't actually thought about your strengths and weaknesses properly. So you could say something like, I like everything to be totally perfect all the time. And you would try and say that that's a weakness. It's not really. It's a fake weakness. It's really a strength that you're pretending is some awful weakness, and it's just nonsense. So don't do that. Second thing is talk about fixing it. So if you've got a weakness, identify it and think about what you could do to get over that weakness, and spend more time talking about what development needs you have and how you're going to develop and get over that weakness, and not about why this is a crippling weakness is going to make you terrible at the job. The next thing that you do is make sure it is something that Marks and Spencers don't care about. If they care about it, it is going to be a problem, and it's going to stop you getting the job. So pick something that's a genuine weakness, but something that is not important to the job that you're applying for. And I'll give you some ideas of simple ones that you could talk about. The example here I've got is I have an offensive personality and serious body odor. If you were to say that, you're not going to get the job. So don't pick a weakness that they care about. The way that you structure your answer is you say, a weakness that I'm aware of is, say what it is, and then say, to overcome this, I will, and talk more about what you could do to get over this weakness than why the weakness is a problem. Some ideas, simple ones that are not particularly relevant to most jobs at Marks & Spencer, but are actually weaknesses. If you only speak English, well, chances are 90% of the people applying for jobs at Marks & Spencer probably only speak English, because in the United Kingdom, for example, the vast majority of native-born people only speak one language, which is really disappointing, and something that should be improved, but that's the truth. And that could be your weakness, because lots of people you're competing with would also have that as a weakness. Delegation. If you're not applying for management, you're not going to be delegating. If you're not a manager in a store, you're not going to be going around the store saying, you do this, you do this, you do this. That could be your weakness. Public presentation. So if you're terrified of the idea of standing up on stage in front of hundreds of people giving a big corporate presentation, you could say that as a weakness, because if you're applying for an entry-level job in Marks & Spencer, you're not likely to be doing large corporate presentations to hundreds of people. Maybe in 20 years, if you move up and get a senior job, you might have to do that, by which time it's not a weakness. So they really wouldn't care if that was your weakness. So that's a particularly good one to use. So that's how you get through the strengths and weaknesses question. Let's move on to the next question, which is quite a tricky one, and one you want to be ready for just in case, which is, why are you leaving your current job? And I tend to think of this as what we call a negative screening question. So it's a question they're asking not so you can give a good answer, but so that you have an opportunity to give a bad answer and they can spot someone that they don't want to hire. And I'm going to show you certain things that if you say an answer to this, you're not going to get the job. And then some things that are good reasons for leaving your current job that will get you past this question. So you've got some positive things to say, some negative things to say. Focus on the positives, avoid the negatives. So M&S are fine with things like if you're seeking promotion. So if you're working in one store and you're applying for a job slightly higher, or if M&S is paying slightly more than your previous job, that's a perfectly reasonable reason to be moving job. If your family's moving, if you're really enthusiastic about working with M&S and you saw the job advert for M&S and you're like, this is brilliant, this is a company I really want to work for, talk about that. That's a perfectly reasonable reason to be leaving your current employer, because you like M&S so much. That's a good reason. Company restructure, so that means that it's nothing to do with your performance, just that company was reducing a particular department and the whole department was gone. That's a perfectly valid reason. If the company you're working for went bankrupt, closed, of course you're going to be leaving that job. And if you've got a good reputation and it's been expressed to you that they don't want to lose you or they've tried to retain you in the job, then you could also say that. And if you are able to continue with that job or go straight back to it or be hired back straight away, that's something you can mention. On the other hand, there are certain things that they don't like to hear. So if you talk about all the problems you've been having at work, if you've got lots of complaints about how awful your employer was, or you might have had a really terrible manager who was the most awful person ever, but now is not the time to slag off management. If you're in an interview with a store manager talking about how awful and horrible your other boss was, they're going to think that the second you leave this interview, you're going to talk about them that way, and they're not going to be interested in hiring you. If you were, fired, that's not a great thing. That's not, if you're removed from your job for gross misconduct, that's going to be a really touchy subject. That's going to go down very negative, of course. That's a difficult one to get through. Fell out with a co-worker, that's not the time to discuss it, or really any negatives or horrible things about your previous employer, even if they were awful. You're not going to bring this up in the interview. So focus on the positives of M&S rather than the negatives of your previous employer. You may have loved your previous employer, but you want to be saying that if that's the case. If you loved your previous employer, say that. But also talk up M&S, and that's how you get through this question. The next one is a bonus. Is M&S is known for asking lots of variations on this. They'll go, describe a time when you did this, or describe a time when you showed this. And they could come up with a whole load of them. And I've seen loads of people ask loads of different ones. And it's impossible to tell exactly what you'll be asked. But what I can show you is how you answer that sort of question. So every single time they say, describe a time when you did this, or give me an example of when you did this, there is a method that works. So it's called the STAR technique. So you say, what was the situation? What was the task you had to do? What actions did you take? And what was the brilliant super result that solved everything and made everything wonderful? That's how you answer it. So let's look at a simple example. And this is just a made-up example of delivering great customer service. And it shows you the way that you always structure these answers. So the situation. Customer came in specifically to buy a train-themed cake for their autistic son. However, it was out of stock. Classic scenario. Customer wants to buy something not in stock. What do you do? So let's think about the task. So it's obviously very important in this situation that the customer gets this particular design. You can't just swap it for something else in this case. And so it's very important that you do everything you can to help the customer. And by saying phrases like, we wanted to do everything that we can for the customer, it shows a commitment to customer service. Then you say your action. What did you do about this? I checked in the back to see if we held any stock without success, so there wasn't any. I then called another store in the chain and they had it in stock. Brilliant. You've got a problem and you've done something that has solved it, and then you say the results, something always positive, always make the result a good thing. The customer was thrilled by the outstanding service provided, received a personal thank you card the next day. Brilliant. So that's how you do it. You go through the STAR technique in that structure. I've looked at some previous interviews at Marks & Spencer and thought about what people have been asked and pulled these out. So they've been asked about customer service, problem solving, teamwork, and a time where you overcame adversity. So it'd be a good idea just to think up a simple example for each of those four, and that's the most common ones. And the process of practicing answers to that will mean any describe a time when you did this is going to be much easier for you to answer. Before we finish, I've got another bonus, which is best questions that you could ask them at the end of your interview. So you might want to ask, what does a perfect M&S employee look like? So you can find out what they're looking for and see how your skills, experience, and personality matches with what they actually want. You might want to ask about what's the best thing about working at M&S, and they'll tell you what they love about the company, and you can enjoy that and take that as your thing as well, that you can say, I would love that as well, and get really involved and passionate about that particular thing that they love so much. Then you can ask about the team that you're working with, show an interest in your colleagues. Definitely ask about the next steps in the recruitment process, show that you really care about getting this job and you're eager to find out what happens next. And also I'd recommend that you just make up one question on the day. So as they're saying things, if anything you're wondering about and going, I'm not sure about that, remember it and then ask it at the end. So it's a bit more spontaneous. So I hope this video was helpful to you. If it was, please like and subscribe below and put in the comments what questions Marks & Spencer asked you. And finally, thank you very much for watching.